Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another Master Command update video. We're going to be going through the patch notes for update version 1.5.0 Cold Steel. This is the update that is going to introduce the Polish and Swedish DLC. There's also quite a few free changes as well, so whether you buy the DLC or whether you don't, there are going to be some important updates in here for you. This is a long one. I skimmed through it. I didn't read every single thing, but I skimmed through it. It's a long one. I will try my best to get through this as quickly as possible. If there are some things that aren't really changes to gameplay, like new maps or new uniforms, I'm gonna kind of just skip over that. I'm mostly here to see like how has the game changed, what are the new factions bringing, stuff like that. Okay, let's go ahead and start reading. So, the philosophy behind this update. This is our largest update to Master Command yet, alongside a major free update packed with new features and content. We're also releasing a new DLC that adds two nations to the game, Sweden and Poland. Sweden and Poland each come with completely unique gameplay mechanics. Sweden introduces the military school, while Poland brings the Polish-Lithuanian same government system. I'll explain both systems in more detail later in the changelog. Also, I'm just going to say this word same. This is how I've heard the developer pronounce it. I haven't looked into it myself. I actually meant to look into it before I record this video, but oops, here we are. I didn't look into how to properly pronounce it, and so I will just say same, as I've heard the developers say. If I'm incorrect, feel free to let me know. And apologies for any mispronunciations throughout this video. Since the Scorched Earth update, we've also been closely monitoring your feedback and making improvements to balance, pacing, and overall gameplay. Combat should feel better paced, with charge damage becoming more impactful again. Range lethality has also been adjusted so that late game battles are less extreme, making them feel more tense and interesting. The new weather system adds another layer to both the campaign and battles, while the new general staff customization and skill points give you more ways to shape and roleplay your commander. On top of that, this update includes new content overall, including a new gun, new doctrines, and new officer traits. We did not have time to get any new battle maps in, but I plan on making a few more either this week or next week alongside a small patch. The DLC also adds a large amount of additional content beyond Sweden and Poland, including 10 new items, 14 new doctrines, 8 new encounters, and 12 new officer traits. Altogether, these additions should bring more variety, replayability, and long term depth to the game. For the changelog, I'm going to highlight all of the DLC specific changes first, and underneath those, I will detail everything else that is arriving in this update for free. I'm incredibly grateful for all your support. We would not have made it this far without you. Okay, let's go ahead and start learning about the DLC. The Lion and the Eagle DLC is now available. It adds the kingdoms of Sweden and Poland-Lithuania to the game. We've also put the base game on sale for 20% off, so tell a friend to check out Master of Command. That's what I'm doing right now. You guys, check out Master of Command. I have a lot of fun playing it. Theoretically, you guys have a lot of fun watching, so check it out. If they've been waiting for a sale. You can purchase the DLC as part of our new Complete Edition bundle, which will give you a discount even if you already own a copy of the base game. Okay, Swedish nation overview. By the 1760s, Sweden's military reputation had declined from its height during the age of Charles XII. Sweden entered the Seven Years' War hoping to reclaim western Pomerania, but the campaign produced few decisive results. Much of the war was spent encamped or conducting sieges, and Sweden eventually withdrew after Russia switched sides in 1762. Sweden's national doctrine slows your campaign movement speed, reflecting its indecisiveness during the conflict. You have a unique stance called the Death March, which can compensate for this. It is faster than the normal force march, but you will suffer attrition while using it. There's also a march discipline reform, which can help with the slower campaign movement speed. So we can see here, Death March increases your campaign movement speed by 50%, but you take 1% attrition each day. You have minus 65% campaign visibility, minus 25% army replenishment. Okay, Sweden has a new mechanic called the military school. We did not want Sweden to feel weak purely for the sake of historical accuracy. Instead, Sweden begins with a fairly average force that can be reformed over the course of a campaign through military research. Military research is boosted in two main ways: by winning battles and by dragging and dropping treatises or military staff into the military school to accelerate your progress. Through the military school, Sweden can adopt older Carolean reforms inspired by the Gapa tactics of the early 1700s, focusing on aggressive charges and shock combat. Alternatively, you can pursue the more contemporary reforms of Arensvard, emphasizing accuracy, cover, and veterancy. These reforms can also be stacked multiple times. For example, you could research Gapa tactics 4 times to gain plus 40% charge damage, but at the cost of minus 20% stamina. So here you can see some of the reforms. Some of them were covered up by this tooltip here, but these are pretty cool. I like it. Very interesting. So you can, if you're more melee oriented, you can go down that. If you're more shooting oriented, or not even shooting oriented, but like army veterancy gain and morale, that's good for everyone. Command radius combat effectiveness, that's good for anyone who has an officer or the general nearby. So that's really neat. Um, Swedish army compositions. Sweden has 3 army compositions to choose from: the Endelta forces, the Varvade troops, and Pomeranian Corps. The Endelta forces represent Sweden's more traditional national troops built around older shock tactics and aggressive battlefield action. So yeah, they look kind of like your beginner Russian, the Cantonist recruits, right? They look like that. They get infantry charge plus 15% in combat, or sorry, in command radius. So they kind of lean into charging. Varvade troops are a more modern professional force based in Sweden's North German territories. They receive a campaign bonus that discounts treatises and staff officers, allowing them to accelerate research through the military school even faster. So, cool. Yeah, you get more progress. Um, Selling off your treatise and staff officer items. Maybe not selling them off. There's got to be a better word for that. Um, Utilizing them, I guess. I don't know. However, your daily reform progress is slower, so you really need to be pumping treatises and staff officers into your research. Um, yeah, they look elite but small. Finally, the Pomeranian Corps focuses on light infantry and cavalry. They gain a reload speed bonus while fighting from cover, but suffer higher losses in melee combat. So, um, definitely not a army composition that you want to be building a lot of melee units for. You want to, um, like it says here, probably be going into light infantry the most. Cavalry, I feel like, is kind of odd. Um, I feel like I'm rarely using my cavalry for shooting. Like, yeah, maybe they'll get a shot off on the charge, but um, I don't know what the Swedish tree has. Like I know there's the I know there's a unit tree down here, right? I don't know if they have like a really good dragoon unit. Maybe that's what this Pomeranian Horsejäger is. Like it's like a really good dragoon unit where this would be helpful. Um so maybe that'll be really interesting. I don't know. We'll see. I think I think for cavalry though, I'd like to see them have like a really high accuracy. Like I want them to have like a very powerful volley as they're charging in. Um, I don't know that I care as much about their reload, but I mean, this seems cool. It'll be interesting to try out. One other thing here, because you are taking more melee damage, you actually don't want your cavalry to go into melee. You want it to be shooting. So, I guess that's I guess that's the point, right? Like, if you're taking more melee damage, your cavalry needs to be shooting. So let's give them a reload bonus if they're in cover. I guess is the um like the play style that they went with, that the developer chose. Okay, as some of you may know, Poland-Lithuania did not directly participate in the Seven Years' War, although it was tied to Saxony through a personal union. The Commonwealth itself had been heavily weakened and demilitarized under Russian influence since the Great Northern War. Your goal as Poland-Lithuania is to escalate your involvement and force your way into the conflict. To reflect this, Poland cannot purchase brigade slots normally. Instead, you need to petition the same to escalate the war, opening up additional brigades through political action. Poland has a new mechanic called the Polish-Lithuanian Sejm. To build Sejm support, you can win battles, make concessions, or destroy settlements using the new foray stance. A foray works similarly to a raid, but instead of focusing purely on material gain, it generates political power by intimidating the Sejm and demonstrating your strength. Historically, forays were carried out by nobles against one another. They originally functioned as a form of legal enforcement, often involving the removal of nobles from disputed property. Over time, however, they were increasingly carried out without legal sanction, with powerful nobles raiding each other's estates to consolidate influence. Um, I really don't know the history behind foray, right, and how nobles went and like forayed each other, right? In my mind, the the way this works is you are raiding a town and you are sending some of your spoils home, and the same is increasingly supporting the war effort because they're like, oh, we are getting rich from the army sending stuff our way. So I don't know, maybe that's kind of my headcanon for how 4A works. But here's an interesting historical explanation for how 4A is supposed to work. As you can see, for A, you get for each day you're raiding, you get one Sejm power, $2 per regiment, 3 provisions per regiment, 4 ammo per regiment. So, an interesting take on raiding for sure. The reforms available through the Sejm are quite powerful. Some provide temporary effects, such as requesting new guns, horses, or manpower. Others are permanent, in addition to escalating war involvement to open up brigade slots. You can pass reforms that increase the maximum unit size of your infantry, cavalry, artillery, and even your general's bodyguard. These reforms let Poland-Lithuania play tall, building fewer but much larger and more powerful units. They can also be stacked multiple times. In one of my own playthroughs, I focused heavily on strengthening my hetman and managed to grow his bodyguard unit to over 1,000 men. That's kind of fun. It is absolutely ridiculous, but also very fun. Hey, that's what I said. Despite some of the absurd possibilities, Poland-Lithuania is very difficult at the start. I recommend opening your second brigade slot as soon as possible, then using reforms to build your political party, which makes future reforms cheaper to pass. Opening your third brigade before the end of Act 1 is extremely important. Keep in mind, however, that unlocking it costs 105% political power, which is impossible to accumulate unless you first use the Build Political Party action to gain a 5% discount on all reforms. It kind of makes me wonder what it's going to be like to open a third or not a third, but like a fourth and a fifth uh, brigade, right? It seems like you're going to have to be pumping up your political party quite a bit in order to make the fourth and fifth brigades achievable. Poland-Lithuania has 3 army compositions to choose from: the Commonwealth Army, Noble Cavalcade, and Magnate Militia. The Commonwealth Army represent the conventional Polish army with a fair amount of Saxon influence in their structure and even their flags. Their bonus is that they get a free officer anytime they visit a city for the first time. This is especially helpful since officers can be embedded into the Sejm for influence. Um, the next composition is the Noble Cavalcade. This is the definitive cavalry composition if you want to roleplay the arrival of the Polish Hussars. Their bonus is getting plus 100% or double stamina recovery while in command radius. If your cavalry tire out from shot charges, they can quickly regroup and regain all of their combat effectiveness. They also start with the highest Sejm influence and some expensive items, which can be liquidated into cash to bribe officials and consolidate even more support. They start off with a bunch of cavalry. That's pretty neat. Oh, this wasn't mentioned here in the description, but non-cavalry stamina is down 20%. So keep that in mind if you're building like grenadiers or something like that. They're going to have less stamina. They're going to tire out more quickly. So this is a composition where if you like having grenadiers in your army, maybe you and you like using them specifically for melee, maybe you opt for cavalry instead, since their stamina has been nerfed by 20%. The last composition is likely the most interesting of all, including the 3 Swedish compositions. The Magnate militia are also led by the nobility, but they lead their own private forces rather than commanding regular units. Magnate troops are very small in size, but extremely elite. They are very fragile and require good micromanagement. but if the player passes same reforms to increase the size of their units, they become extremely powerful. Their bonus is that they gain twice as much same influence from foraying, so they are similar to the Cossack composition in that regard, where they are focused more on raiding. Oh, and they actually start with a little mascot. That's fun. I've been thinking that mascots seem like they're really difficult to come by. I think like in all of my playthroughs, I think I've maybe come across like two. Like I feel like I very, very rarely see the mascot. I would like to be able to get it like maybe like once in each playthrough. Um, but anyway, that's just me being nitpicky. This is cool. I like the idea of this. We'll have to see how small the unit sizes are. I'm not a fan of small unit sizes, but since you can increase their unit size through the same, I think that's pretty cool. And there's the unit trees. I'm not going to bother really clicking on it or anything, but you can look for a second. DLC Doctrines. New Universal Doctrines have been added as a part of the DLC. The first two are free, the rest are DLC exclusive. Some of these doctrines are unique to the base game nations, like the Colonial Company Network, which is specific to Britain. You'll need to play to see what these new doctrines do. Sweden and Poland also have their own doctrines you can find as region rewards. But I'll save those as a surprise. Poland and Sweden both get 6 region reward doctrines you can find. So is that like combined they get 6 or individually they get 6? I imagine it's combined they get 6, as in each one gets 3. Um, new items added to the game. They are all DLC specific. So there you go. Get a moose, get a beaver. That's pretty cool. Artillery horse, sure, sounds fun. Wild goose increases your luck skill so that you're more likely to find cool stuff when you're walking around. Just kidding. I don't know what it does. I'm just making an RPG joke. Um, New officer traits were also added in the DLC. The first 2 traits have been made free. Many of the new traits affect your entire army's campaign stats, like Resourceful, which reduces the army's ammo and food consumption. I love that. Um, any effects that are campaign wide, colored in yellow, still apply from reserve, so you can have a bureaucrat or resourceful brigade officer hanging out in a reserve slot, giving passive buffs to the army. That's actually really cool. I like the idea of finding an officer, and he's got these like really good bureaucratic or like logistical traits, and you just throw him in the reserve. And he's helping your army from the reserves, and he can also serve as like a backup officer, where like if you run into an event that kills an officer, like it kills your bureaucratic officer instead of your guys that are actually leading the troops. I really like this attractive icon. I feel like this is a reference to Handsome Squidward from SpongeBob. If you know, you know. Check it out, Handsome Squidward. Let's see. DLC encounters. There are new animal encounters. Sweden has the moose, and Poland has the beaver. Let's freaking go! I can't wait to play as Poland and get a beaver. The eagle will now be part of the HRE DLC, which is free. The jeweler encounter is also free since it appears at slums, and I know that slums are avoided, so I want to make sure that players without the DLC still have a decent encounter that they could find going to the slums. I actually like going to the slums because I really enjoyed the encounter that lets you see where all the armies are on the map. I know some of the slum events are rough, but I think being able to know where all the armies are is just such a good encounter. I feel like it's worth the risk. Achievements, just like in the base game, there are achievements to work through to unlock compositions and renowned units. I'm not going to look too much at that. A bunch of DLC art. Look at that. New uniforms, very cool. New symbols for your flags, really awesome. Okay, here we go. We're into the free update stuff. If you guys aren't buying the DLC, but you still enjoy playing the game, turn your ears on. We're getting into the free stuff. So there is a new weather system in campaign, which affects battles and campaign. So you've got an assortment of weather here, doing all sorts of things. Most of this looks bad. Most of this looks like it's gonna hurt you. But I know that like clear and beautiful, those have like good modifiers. Fair, I don't know. Here's an example of a winter camp during a blizzard. That's really cool. I like that they took the time to kind of like animate that in the camp. The winterized quarters malice, which you get when winter occurs, now reduces visibility by 10% instead of 15%, since there is now snow and blizzard weather, which heavily reduce visibility. So they're reducing the like the double trouble that you can get in, right? If it's winter and blizzard, like um the compounding effect from having those two malices on your visibility is not as significant. Okay, new insight system. For all non-DLC nations, they receive insight points from fighting battles. You can put insight points to improve your general's command radius buffs for the nearby troops in battle, or put points into campaign buffs to improve things like casualty restoration, veterancy, etc. The more points you put into campaign buffs, the larger your general's staff will appear in battle. The more points you put into battle buffs, the faster your general will become, and the larger his command radius will get. Insight points are gained from battles. Think of them like wisdom gained. The more casualties you suffer in battle, the more insight you will gain. This acts as a good catch up mechanic for any player suffering a lot of losses or defeats. Insight will be gained in larger quantities. Your battles are now classified as minor, decisive, major, etc. Depending on the battle ranking, you will gain more/less insight. A decisive battle generates the least amount of insight, but a minor victory will generate the most. You can also now see the percentage each side lost underneath the lost section. Interestingly, Sweden and Poland use an inversion of the catch-up mechanic. They will gain more reform and political power from decisive victories compared to their losses. The general staff unit now has a gold UI in battle. This way you can clearly scan the battlefield and see where he is without getting confused with other cavalry units. The general now has a regimental flag based on each country's Garde du Corps equivalent instead of being a random flag. General portraits have been redone. Um, and you can also check out your bodyguards' equipment and give them stuff, which is neat. And you can see their stats, which is also cool. Okay, campaign modifier changes added two new settings to the campaign. First, there is a new hidden AI personalities toggle in case you want the AI's behaviors to feel less predictable. This will hide the icon that reveals the AI's behavioral tendencies and their strengths and weaknesses. Second, there is now a coalition armies toggle, which raises the limit of how many nationalities can be in a region at once. Normally, there are 1 to 2 nationalities that can be in a region, but with coalition armies enabled, there can theoretically be up to 6. Depends on how many enemies you have turned on. Coalition armies do not increase the difficulty, it simply allows for a greater variety of brigade nationalities in the armies you fight. I think that's cool. In my last campaign, fighting as the auxiliary corps, I think we got the Austrians like every single region, which was kind of lame. Coalition armies are going to make sure that you're not just fighting the Austrians or the dreaded Hungarian grenadiers over and over and over. So here's an example. Apparently they have British, Russian, and HRE troops. Very cool. Historical enemies is now disabled by default. This is because MOC shines most with a greater amount of variety. Additionally, the new Polish nation is not a historical enemy of any nation in the game since they were not involved in the 7 Years' War, and I would like DLC owners to fight against the new nations if they go with the game's default settings. Players can actually choose whether they want historical enemies on or off by default when beginning campaigns in their game settings as well. The multi-front conflict modifier, which made units and officers 30% more expensive, has been merged into corrupt commissars. Corrupt commissars normally make units or resources and items at settlements 25% more expensive, but now also includes units and officers at 25% more expensive. This means instead of having two modifiers at 30 plus 30% and plus 25%, there's now just one blanket. All settlement costs are up 25%. Since multi-front modifier was consolidated into corrupt commissars, it has given us an additional modifier slot to play with. The new modifier is reinforced headquarters. This makes the HQ battles tougher and reintroduces the reinforcement HQ in Act 3, which will arrive with 6 brigades, making for a great finale. So it says it makes the HQ battles tougher. It's not immediately clear to me how it makes it tougher. I know the developer, when he was working on the DLC, said that maybe each act would have like a reinforcing HQ, kind of like how the old Act 3 used to be. So I don't know if they went with that, like there's going to be a second HQ battle each act, or if it means that your one HQ battle is just going to be more difficult in acts 1 and 2. However, it does appear that Act 3 will be getting a second HQ battle again if you turn this modifier on, and since I strive to play on Marshall, that means that we will be fighting a second Act 3 HQ battle that will have 6 brigades. And since all of the units are, since a unit is doubled in each brigade, that means we're going to be fighting 30 units in that final battle. So that will be fun. Combat changes. Many of these adjustments were made to balance out a lot of the drastic changes introduced in the Scorched Earth update, which had slowed down combat. Stamina loss in gunfights has been reworked. Units no longer lose stamina throughout the reload process. Instead, stamina is now spent when a reload is completed. This means tired units ordered to hold fire will properly recover stamina instead of exhausting themselves while slowly finishing reloads. It also makes very fast firing units spend more stamina over time, while slower, lower tier units exhaust themselves less quickly. For example, a Prussian Grenadier will lose about 3 more stamina per minute during sustained fire, while a surf recruit will lose about 3 less stamina per minute. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Um, Cavalry carbine accuracy has been made 5% higher. Supply consumption on the buckshot, buck and ball, quartered shot has come down further, making all these types of ammunition more viable to use. Global accuracy reduced by 5%, specifically to help curb instances in the late game of both the player and AI dishing out enormous damage to each other in single volleys. Speed buff that retreating units get when they rout has been decreased by 20%, making them easier to chase down. That's good. There's sometimes when I've been like in melee with a unit and then they rout and they are just like zooming away, just like insanely fast. Speed buff retreating units get speed. The speed buff that retreating units get lasts only 6 seconds now instead of 8. Melee attacks against retreating units is 20% more deadly, making it easier to chase down and shatter routing units. I like that, especially if you're using like provincial cavalry and you're just having them run down routing units. The kills that they get go up like very slowly, so this will make them more efficient at chasing down routing units and get their veterancy quicker. I like that. Rear flanking morale damage increased by 5%. Rear flanking charge morale damage increased by 10%. Casualties on impact of charge reduced by 5%, but morale from charge impact increased by 5%. Charging into open order formations is 5% more effective. That's good. In my last campaign, we charged into some Grenzer units, and oh my gosh, they were fighting off my Palatine units that had been like equipped for melee, and I was kind of losing my mind that they just weren't like melting. Um, on the flip side, what were they, Feldjäger units got charged a couple of times and they did not melt on impact. So um, maybe I need to keep an eye out for them more in the future. Then again, I don't use light infantry a whole lot, so I digress. Light infantry fire damage reduction is 10% more effective, but their morale damage received is 5% less effective. All light cavalry stamina reduced by 5 points. Global casualties impact on the morale of the army has increased by 4%. This means if one side suffers a lot of casualties, their troops will be slightly more willing to retreat at the end of the fight instead of clinging on. I hope that has a big impact on artillery. Probably one of my least favorite things is I defeated the enemy army, but now they have like 7 artillery units that I need to take out, and they all switch over to canister, and I just start losing swaths of men trying to destroy the artillery at the end. Would love to not have that happen. Okay. Local casualties impact on the morale of that unit has increased by 10%. This means if a unit has suffered extreme losses, it's less likely to or less willing to cling on. You may now order the retreat of a unit even if the morale threshold for your army has not been met, but only if that unit has lost half of its morale. Previously, you needed to wait until your entire army's morale collectively fell to at least 75% before being able to retreat individual units. This was to prevent exploit strategies where you'd load into a battle, get some kills with artillery, then retreat, and repeatedly fight the battle until you've whittled down your enemy. The change effectively means that if your army's morale is very high, if there's a unit that is in danger and losing men rapidly, you're able to individually retreat them off the battlefield. Rivers have been made more costly to cross. Accuracy, while in one changed from minus 50% to minus 60%, stamina loss has been changed from minus 30% to minus 40%. Movement speed has been reduced from minus 75 to minus 80. So crossing rivers is going to be really difficult. If you can force the enemy AI to fight you while they are in the river, it's going to be even more advantageous. Marshes also more costly to fight in. Accuracy has been changed from minus 25 to minus 40%. So again, see if you can get the enemy AI to fight you while they're in a marsh. Lances are now visible if equipped. That's cool. Some unit changes. Freikorps Dragoons now correctly have a carbine by default. Fry Infantry Fusiliers lose 5 reload but gain 5 melee. Fry Infantry Jaegers lose 10 reload. Freikorps Veteran Jaegers lose 5 accuracy. For Russia, Russian Provincial Cavalry loses 150 manpower but gains 5 reload, 5 morale, 5 melee. Cossacks have had a general rework to be a little more powerful. Swiss units have all gained 5 morale but lost 5 charge, giving them a more defined role compared to the Irish, for example. The Irish lose 5 stamina to also distinguish them more from German units who previously had identical stamina. This also helps to balance out the Irish a bit more since they received such a large buff in the previous update. French Provincial Cavalry loses 150 manpower but gains 5 morale, 10 melee. Nice. French Provincial Cavalry, I'm trying to remember if they were just like totally awful or not. I feel like there's one cavalry unit. Maybe it's the Imperial Provincial Cavalry, but they have like 10 melee in it. That's terrible. But glad to see they're getting more melee. Volunteer Provincial Cavalry gain 10 stamina and 5 movement speed. Volunteer Dragoons gain 10 stamina. Maybe that's who I was thinking of, is the Volunteer Provincial Cavalry. Maybe they had absolutely dreadful melee stats. Volunteer Hussars lose 5 accuracy but gain 10 stamina. And Volunteer Cav takes. Sorry, this is an explanation. Volunteer Cav takes longer to get, is less convenient to get, and is also smaller than baseline French cavalry with lower morale. These changes specialize them more into speed and stamina for hit and run. I like that they're being differentiated a little bit. Um, Volunteer cavalry is pretty awful compared to typical French cavalry. I think the only reason that you would maybe go down the volunteer line is to get like good dragoons. But I mean, you could always just leave your French dragoons that are through the um, the like main cavalry line. Uh, but yeah, I still think volunteer cavalry isn't really good enough to get, like to actually like aim to get it. But I do appreciate that there have been changes here to try to make them more viable. Hungarian veteran grenadiers lose 5 charge. Thank goodness. Those guys were so scary to fight against. Yeah, especially if they had like the Carolean doctrine. Oh my gosh, those guys would just cut through you like butter. Austrian horse grenadiers gain 5 accuracy. Holy Roman Empire. Imperial Provincial Cavalry loses 100 manpower but gains 10 accuracy, 5 melee. That's cool. Imperial Hussars gain 5 accuracy. Imperial Cuirassiers gain 5 accuracy. Württemberger Musketeers gain 5 stamina, 5 charge. Feldjägers gain 5 charge. Saxon Chevaulegers gains 5 accuracy, 5 speed. Saxon Tatar Cavalry loses 5 melee. I'm kind of sad that the Tatar Cavalry has been nerfed. In the previous patch, they took a charge nerf. Here, they're taking a melee nerf. I thought that this was like a really fun cavalry unit to use, and it was before the charge nerf. It was I think it was just slightly worse than the Hungarian Hussars. Especially if you were playing as the Hungarian Vanguard, the Hungarian Hussars were just insane. But I really liked the idea that there was a cavalry that was just slightly under the Hungarian Hussars. But after the charge nerf and after this melee nerf, I think Tatar cavalry is like I think they've seen a big hit. I think they're still a good light. They're probably still a good light cavalry unit, but definitely not what they used to be. Saxon Cuirassiers gain 5 charge. Fixed a bug where the Württemberg Horse Grenadiers and Saxon Carabiner Guards were using each other's stats by accident. British Dragoons cost 1 less veterancy and gain 100 manpower. I think that's a big boost for the British. The Dragoons are fairly strong, but I always felt like their low manpower held them back. Um, so, um, yeah, British Dragoons much better now. I will stop making fun of them for being a small unit. All Hessian infantry gains 200 manpower. Nice. All Hanoverian infantry gains 5 speed. Hanoverian veteran foot loses 5 stamina, 5 reload, and gains 5 accuracy. Hanoverian grenadiers lose 5 stamina, lose 10 reload, gain 5 accuracy. Brunswick musketeers gain 5 morale. Brunswick grenadiers lose 5 reload and 5 melee. Here we go. Campaign changes. You can no longer take terrain or attrition while raiding. So if you're accidentally positioned on a river while raiding, you won't bleed troops anymore. Experience from battles, prisoner action, and drilling now affects reserve units and officers. This won't dilute the amount of experience gained, it simply adds experience gained to the reserve units instead of exempting them. Cool, that's neat. Reroll cost changes. Instead of all reroll costs being $50, then 100, it's now been changed based on what you're rerolling. Rerolling officers' skills is now much cheaper since it impacts fewer units compared to doctrines, and officers can sometimes be hard to specialize. Yes, I agree. I can't tell you how often on my melee officers I'm getting a bunch of shooting traits, and on my shooting officers I'm getting a bunch of melee traits. So now it's now 40 for the first reroll, then 80 from that point. Rerolling regions now cost slightly more. It's 60 for the first reroll and 120 from that point. Doctrines have had the highest price change, which are now 80 for the first reroll and 160 from that point on. Found it too easy for people in Act 3 to reroll continuously until they stacked certain doctrines to an absurd degree. Doctrine stacking can be fun, but I just want it to be a little more balanced. Field army move speed slightly slowed on campaign. Encamped army move speed slowed down on campaign. Made any encounter choices that result in spawning an enemy army yellow to help warn players that their choice will result in combat. Or that it may result in combat, right? Because, I mean, there's some where it's just a likely chance that you spawn an army, and sometimes you won't, even when you're desperately trying to spawn an army. Removed the text weak from field armies in encounter tooltips, as it would often be misleading. Okay. I mean, I liked knowing whether it was a weak field army or a strong field army because, in my mind, a weak field army was kind of on the same level as a patrol, just with higher quality units, and then a strong field army was like on the level of a encamped army, but maybe with lower quality units. So I kind of actually liked that tooltip, but that's okay. The default unit rewards for non-renowned units now come with slightly higher veterancy. Renowned units and many of the guard units now have a 4th tier of replenishment speed called Very Slow. It's a black icon. This means forming an army made up entirely of guards or renowned units will be riskier. There are also doctrines in the game that boost replenishment speed, and so they will be more useful for fielding armies with many renowned units and guards. So I could see late game, if you're getting like a bunch of the end game units and they have the very slow replenishment, I could see getting one of the doctrines to improve their replenishment speed, especially if you're playing on Marshall. This is gonna be rough. You're gonna be getting like 10 troop replenishment per day. Uh okay, here we go. Raiding now provides 1 less loot item, but provides 1 additional food generation per regiment raiding. Saxon army composition has had its artillery upgraded to field artillery instead of battalion artillery. British expedition composition has been adjusted. Its marksman has been upgraded to excellent quality, as have its basket hilt swords. The doctrine bonus has also been reworked. It now gains 100% veterancy from all sources, including drilling and combat, but this bonus is reduced by 5% for each unit in the army. This means the bonus will eventually disappear if the army is fully expanded, but by then the player should have already benefited from greatly increased veterancy gain in the early game. Players can also choose to leave the 5th and final brigade empty, which is more expensive anyway, to keep part of the bonus active. Hanoverian composition loses 50 starting ammunition, but has been given a new Liège. I think that's how you say it. Liège? I think it's Liège. Carbine as a starter item. Austrian Crownland compositions accuracy. Sorry, let me start that over. Austrian Crownland compositions accuracy bonus reduced from plus 15% to plus 10% is just a little too strong and can lead to stale gameplay when the artillery reaches a point of critical mass. Russian Cossack contingent lances were slightly downgraded simply because they have two of them, and so having excellent quality is less justified. Also, under combat changes, I buffed morale damage and charge damage, so I don't want the Cossacks to be overpowered too quickly due to the change. Russian Old Core now starts with 10 insight points, which will be the highest out of any of the base game compositions. Melee is not as powerful as it once was during the launch of the game, and as the composition has felt a little lackluster. So the 10 insight points will let you max out any insight category right away, which also reflects the nature of the old core being comprised of wise or experienced units. So item changes and additions. New Liège musket and carbine added to the game. A few units across France, the HRE, and Poland will use these by default. I preferred when cheese provided morale, so I've made its primary effect a morale buff instead of stamina. I then changed medicinal herbs' secondary effect to boosting stamina. Assumes the medicine helps people stay healthy. Heavy saddle provides slightly less move speed. Light saddles provide slightly less stamina. Heavy saddles made more expensive than light ones. Coffee and tea items have been slightly rebalanced to make tea more attractive to use over coffee. That's kind of curious. I'm wondering if that means that tea got buffed or coffee got nerfed. Artillery limber chest ammo consumption reduction is 10% less effective now. For example, an excellent limber chest reduces ammunition consumption by 40% instead of 50%. Lances now reduce accuracy slightly more. Carolean military treatise changed to reduce stamina by 4 instead of reducing reload by 2. Spontoons now have a third effect, which slightly boosts morale recovery rate. The Dachshund now boosts morale recovery speed instead of increasing range. We've added an Eagle mascot for the free HRE DLC. Eagle now boosts range, which is what the Dachshund previously did. Jönköping musket's melee damage has been very slightly reduced, simply because it already has an accuracy and charge bonus, and it was outclassing the Tula musket in nearly all ways. That is true. I would put the Jönköping on all of my melee units over the Tula because it was just more accurate and you were getting more charge and more melee out of it than the Tula. The Tula was kind of like my backup melee musket. Canteens now boost stamina recovery speed rather than providing stamina as a base stat. Canister shot damage very slightly reduced by about 5%, and its ammo consumption is slightly higher. Okay. Grape shot damage has been untouched, and its ammunition consumption was slightly lowered. Lower caliber artillery pieces now deal less canister damage relative to the higher caliber ones. I guess that means I can't run around with my 6-pound field guns and just like obliterate half of a grenadier regiment anymore. Artillery now takes 200 ammunition to refill, making it a little more expensive to field an army of mini artillery units. History of Charles XII item icon change. Okay, doctrine changes and additions. Foreign advisor doctrine slightly nerfed. It provided plus 5% combat effectiveness at the cost of minus 10% veterancy gain, but the malice has been increased to minus 15%. Combat effectiveness is an extremely powerful stat, and we've added a new doctrine that you can get, which also increases combat effectiveness, so we need to make sure it's balanced if you stack them both. German arms production reduces musket/carbine cost by minus 35% instead of minus 50%. That makes me kind of sad, but good thing I'm done playing the HRE for now, although I need to go back and play the Saxons at some point. Russia's extended supply line doctrine now provides a plus 50% raid speed bonus instead of plus 75%. I was finding that by the late game it was too easy to snowball through raiding, making the playthrough become boring towards the end. 2 free new doctrines leading from the front, and Etat Major, I think. Bloodthirsty has been changed from gaining plus 15% melee skill to instead reducing stamina loss from being in melee by 50%. Um, I don't know. In my mind, I like the extra melee skill, although theoretically, if your stamina is being reduced more slowly, then your unit will be more effective in melee over time. So I don't know. Maybe that ends up being like a neutral change. Maybe that ends up being better, being worse. I'm not sure. Trait generation has been altered. The percentage change of finding rares is now generally higher. We've also improved some of the random generation system to be more consistent. It was previously skewed by the number of traits in each category, so by adding a lot of common traits, it diluted the chances of rares appearing. That's no longer the case. So this is something that I didn't know. I didn't know that you couldn't generate a rare trait uh, when you're assigning your first two traits to the officer. So it's really cool to see some behind the scenes like mechanics here that I didn't know were part of the game, but now we know. That's neat. Two new officer traits added: bureaucratic and resourceful. So this is going to be good for our logistics experts. The chance of finding an animal mascot at the deer encounters has been increased. Yes, yes, this is what I was just complaining about earlier. That I could never, ever, ever find the animal mascot, and now I'm so excited that I can find it. I feel like I was always getting like the the horses encounter, or was it? Yeah, I feel like I was like always getting the horses one, so I'm excited to get a mascot. That's fun. Added the jeweler encounter. You can buy or sell jewelry here, or even smelt your own out of excess ammunition. Interesting. Fixed a bug where the AI would turn away the moment before contact with you, charging them. Improvements made to AI targeting for artillery to make them less likely to expose themselves ahead of their line. Mentioned in the last patch log that we fixed a bug where the AI was able to rapidly charge you, even if its charge momentum bar hadn't depleted yet, which meant they'd continuously launch charges against your unit as you try to pull them back. Seems like the fix wasn't working, but now it is. The AI shouldn't launch instant charges against units that pull back. Slightly reduce the number of grenadiers fielded by the AI in Act 3, replacing many with either veteran musketeers or lifeguards. Um, I think that's generally good. I feel like the Carolan doctrine is really scary, and if they have just a ton of grenadiers, you're cooked. Okay, aggressive profiles. Carolan AI will now wait slightly longer before charging you instead of typically charging after a single volley. Battles would often devolve into mosh pits, which wasn't fun. Agree, concur, 100%. Carolan AI had the wrong malice being applied. It was displayed as receiving a stamina debuff, but it was reducing reload skill instead. Oh, which isn't that impactful considering the personality primarily focuses on charging. Finally, I've slightly buffed its infantry move speed by plus 5% since its nerf is now being correctly applied, and this makes them have a much more distinguished weakness. Uh, Hildburghauser AI has had its stamina buff replaced with a morale buff. So if you engage the columns head on, they'll be harder to break, but if you fire on their flank, it will still be deadly. I've increased the amount of flanking damage they receive from plus 20% plus 25%. Sobieskian AI has had its old morale buff replaced with a melee stamina cost minus 75% buff. This means they won't get tired in melee very easily, which I find more interesting than the previous morale buff, which I've given to Hildburg House, since this is a cavalry oriented AI. Frederick AI has had its reload buff replaced with a general move speed buff of plus 20%. Not as fast as Carolan, but unlike Carolan, the whole army gets the move speed buff instead of only infantry. Also, unlike Carolan, Frederican focuses on gunfire. I've also made it so the AI spreads their ranks a little thinner when using this profile, making them more likely to wrap around your flanks. Uh-oh. Okay, as for the balance profiles, new Gustavian profile added. This inherits the old Saxa effects, which apply a malice to officer morale and a higher chance of officer death. I thought this fit better since Gustavus Adolphus was famously killed in combat while leading from the front. Since Gustavian has taken Saxa's old profile, I've designed a new one for it. Saxa gets plus 40% morale recovery speed, making it more important to time your fire in concentrated volleys. His personality will probably do well against players who rely heavily on free fire. I didn't know that was a thing. Are there people who rely heavily on free fire? I wonder what the tactics are behind that. Saxa also gets an infantry combat effectiveness plus 5%, so its main body fights slightly better. Its weakness is infantry move speed is down 15%, so they should be easier to outmaneuver. Mauritian army deals plus 25% morale damage instead of plus 20%. Um, its malice of plus 15% morale damage received has remained the same. I was finding that this personality wasn't particularly effective compared to others. Um, I will say if this army ends up with a bunch of artillery, they are dangerous. Like the normal units are, I mean, I feel like you can outplay them. Um, but if you have like a mass, if this ends up with like 7 artillery units and they're all dealing out 25% more morale damage, that's gonna hurt. A new Lacian profile added, named after Franz Moritz von Lacy. It gets plus 25% range for light infantry and cavalry. It also has a double reload speed buff for light infantry and cavalry. These are relatively niche bonuses, but they are very powerful, so the few units that are affected by them, skirmishers and carbine cavalry, will be much more dangerous. Its weakness is minus 10% melee, leaving them more vulnerable to charges. Defensive profiles. Blandian AI now receives minus 25% melee damage instead of just 20%. This makes them a little better at countering player compositions that spam cavalry or grenadiers. Municher AI has been renamed to Vauban after Sebastien Leprest, Marquis of Vauban, which is more historically fitting to his tactics. He was known as one of the most important offensive military engineers of the century. No changes to its stats. Uh, Daunian AI remains the same. New Petrine profile added, named after Peter the Great. His bonus is a stamina plus 50% buff, making them very difficult to wear out in prolonged combat. Furthermore, they receive minus 25% less morale damage, making them tough to break. Their malice is accuracy, which is minus 10%. Behaviorally, they are likely to hold a position and defend it for much of the battle without being easily aggroed, unlike personalities like Downian. However, they won't just respond with gunfire if you enter their defensive position. They will actually act more like Caroleans and charge you if you set foot in their area. This is gonna be, I think this is potentially dangerous. Like, if that is true, if you like get into gun range and they just form up and charge you, they're gonna be pretty dangerous because they have extra stamina, meaning that they're gonna be effective in melee for longer, and they take less morale damage, which means it's gonna be harder to break them and get them out of melee if they get into melee. So this could be a pretty threatening army to fight against. We'll just have to see. Okay. So here's a little bit of behind the scenes for the aggression of the armies and the artillery advantage needed in order to be defensive or not. Um, Act 3 encamped armies now field an additional 4 artillery units of medium quality. That means 1 + 1 brigade. Previously, they felt simply like alternative marauder armies, but we want to make them feel like reinforced defensive positions on the map. I feel like in when I was playing as the auxiliary corps, I feel like there were some encamped armies where I was fighting um like six or even 7 artillery units. Um if they get an additional brigade, of 4 artillery units, and then one of these gets doubled, like instantly 5 artillery units, and then adding on whatever was already in that army. Let's say it was even just like, let's say it was 5, right? So the base army has 5, and then you're throwing in another 4 artillery units. One of them will get doubled 5. You're up against 10 artillery. Um, if that is correct, I think that is not fun. I think enemy artillery is one of the least fun aspects of this game, uh, just because they're doing so much damage to you. And it's really hard to even take them out because usually the cavalry will sit back and babysit the artillery. And unless you want to like lose your own cavalry running in there, it's just not going to go well. I think most of the time. So usually, like artillery is the last thing to get taken out because they're well protected by cavalry. So I really hope this is not the case. I really hope I'm not fighting like 10 artillery units in the Act 3 encamped armies. That just does not sound fun. But I mean, I guess we'll see when we play. Act 3 Marauders have had their artillery replaced with a second cavalry brigade. This means they are now 2 infantry brigades and 2 cavalry brigades. They should be very well contrasted against the encamped armies, which are more focused on artillery. Both Marauders and encamped armies provide doctrines, so the player has a choice between battling the cavalry-focused Marauders or the artillery-focused encamped armies. Well, what if I want to fight both? Act 3 Marauders reduced to 2 instead of 3, and I've increased the patrols from 0 to 3. I do like the increase in patrols. It felt a little lame going into Act 3, and you were you could only fight 3 Marauders, 3 encamped armies, and that was it. So I do like the patrols. That way, if you go into Act 3 and you're feeling a little weak, you can beat up these patrols first, and then move on to the Marauders, and then probably move on to the encamped armies. Um, Act 3 now arrives on day 120 instead of day 140. The act is not meant to be standard, where the player is expected to spend significant time building up their army. It is the final test of the game, and so should naturally be quicker and more decisive. All army templates across the game have been altered so that encamped armies focus more on artillery quality, and patrols and marauders focus more on cavalry. Okay, that's fine. That makes sense. I just hope that the encamped armies don't overdo it with the artillery, especially because especially when you get into the late game, a lot of the artillery that you're up against is like um Shuvalovs, it's Brummers, it's Liechtensteins, it's uh Geschwindstücks, right? It's the really high tier artillery. And for the player, I feel like it's really difficult to get one of those good artillery pieces. Like if you want to buy a Brummer artillery unit or artillery, that's like, I think in my last campaign, I want to say it was like $1,800. And you have to make a decision on, am I really going to spend $1,800 on a single like upgrade for a unit? Or am I going to take that $1,800 and buy like 5 other items that I can spread out across the rest of my army? Um, yeah, I don't know. It just kind of feels bad that the enemy gets such high quality artillery and then I'm stuck using like basically whatever I can find. Okay, here's a couple more things. Visual quality life changes. You can now move your entire army by holding left alt and right and then pressing using right click. If you hold down left control as well, you can rotate them. So that's neat. Steam cloud saving, cool. New custom color picker, that's cool. You can now preview doctrines you already have. Nice. UI improvements made in battle that help you calculate why your unit stats are the way they are. I like that. We now more clearly break down combat effectiveness and formation effects. You can also hover over stamina and morale stats to discover if your men are tired and by how much that might be lowering their combat effectiveness. Awesome. For those who might not know, the combat effectiveness stat will increase or decrease the following stats: charge, melee, reload, accuracy. You can now view reload progress displayed on the unit info tab. You can see the percentage of forces lost. AI personality will be shown in the pre and post battle. Game will classify your victories based on casualties suffered. Some cool flags. Formations no longer have gaps every 3 ranks. That means that your guys are just like one solid block now. Neat. Your general has a tooltip, so you can see exactly what he's providing in his command radius. Very cool. I like that. General bug fixes. So fixed a bug upgrading units. Sometimes the item stats weren't being applied properly. Fixed a bug where the bodyguard units for the general would wear the wrong uniform. Fixed a bug where toggling bayonets, your troops weren't physically putting a bayonet on their musket. Fixed a bunch of other bugs. I'm not going to bother uh, reading through them all. One Rise of Frederick change. I've never played the Rise of Frederick campaign. I'll just read it real quick. Reduce the amount of Austrian cuirassiers fielded in the Rise of Frederick campaign's final battle by 1, and downgraded 2 of the veteran Austrian Fusiliers to regular Austrian Fusiliers. Nice. The map was expanded, or I guess like the regions were increased to have Sweden and Poland-Lithuania. New loading screens, and that's it. Cool. We made it. I feel like we didn't spend 3 hours recording this video, so I'm happy. All in all, I think this is a good update. There's a couple of things I'm gonna just wait and see how they play out, like the HQ, the new HQ modifier. See if I can find that real quick. HQ. Actually, let's just see. I think it was like reinforced. Yeah, reinforced headquarters. So we'll need to see how this plays out. And we'll need to see how the artillery increase for encamped armies plays out. Because that could be very challenging. Other than that, though, I think this is really good. I'm excited to play as both Sweden and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. I think this is going to be really fun. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any thoughts, if you think that there's something that is really awesome in this update, anything you're really concerned about. The developer has said this is most likely going to be the last big update, but they will continue to put out maybe a few smaller patches, probably doing some balancing changes, adding new maps, maybe adding in some more flags, stuff like that. But I wouldn't expect to get any more nations. I wouldn't expect to really get more units. I wouldn't expect any big mechanics changes. I think they're just going to be like maybe doing a few more polishing patches, and then they'll probably be done updating the game. But if there's anything here that you think needs another look, please leave a comment. I know that sometimes the developers will watch these videos, and maybe they'll see your comment and think, hey, this person's got a great idea. So thanks everybody for watching. As always, if you're enjoying the content, please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe. All these things support the channel, and I appreciate your support. And we'll catch you in the next video. I'm more likely than not going to be playing as Poland, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and trying to do my best to win another martial campaign. So thanks everybody. We'll see you in the next video.